Hello, hello everyone. It's been a long while. I've been in Japan for the past 2 months, and well, actually, 2 months ago, 1 month ago, I was in Japan for 2 months. I've been back for about a month now, but I've been finishing Max Payne instead, as that project honestly requires a lot more work than a visual novel. Also, I feel like more people are interested in Max Payne and Chaos Head, which is understandable, of course. It is only a novel that I'm playing, quote unquote. But please, thank you for your patience. Again, apologies for not uploading anything. Like I said, I was at ASDF Sun's place. We're Alt F4 now. Um, and I had no means of recording, so hey, whatever, right? Anyways, without further ado, let's continue. I'm sure I read this last time, but both of us had fallen silent. Maybe, maybe the transfer student was just as bad as talking as me. Come to think of it, it might have been coincidental, but I'd never heard her speak. No, that sort of thing didn't matter. More importantly, I had trouble understanding the situation. The stray thugs had picked a fight with me and battered me. Before I continue, I would also like to announce that I do have the Japanese PlayStation game. I bought a PlayStation 3 while I was in Japan, the One Piece Gold Edition, and with that I got uh, Chaos Head Noah, which is the re-release of this game for consoles only. I think PSP, PlayStation 3, and Xbox 360, but only in Japan. So there has not been a released fully translated version, but I'm sure I'll take up that by doing that in video, by translating in video and replacing the black bar so that it says the English text instead. However, that is for another time. And after we finally finish Chaos Head, which will not be for a while, it seemed like I'd passed out, but how long had I been unconscious? Again, I heard it again. I figured someone I knew was nearby talking to me, but I didn't spy anyone likely. Damn it. Why'd I have to start hearing all the oral hallucinations today? Oh boy. I see. Then it was a delusion. Including those blood drenched juvies, of course. I can't think of anything but a delusion. I cannot think of you as anything but a delusion. By the way, I stood on this very place they're looking at right now. You're the same as Seraton, one of my brides who appears only in my mind. You'll always be my wife, Seraton. In the first place, I didn't have any recollection of an idiotic sounding character like this Kozupi. Then who are you? Surely not the transfer student fidgeting right in front of me. The transfer student gave a small nod. You're kidding. It must have been a mere coincidence. And it had appeared as if she were nodding. Thinking so might have been some of the mistake on my part. Some kind of mistake on my part, excuse me. That's completely impossibly impossible.
That's not true. That's impossible.
Yeah, you can't blame me for that one. Like you can pull up this, like you can pull off this telepathy-esque stuff.
どうしたら信じてくれるの？
What did she mean by yeah? The transfer student looked vaguely sad, so I couldn't quite tell. Damn it. I was getting fed up with this. If you're gonna say that, Kozupi or whatever, give me some proof that you're the transfer student.
証明？
What are your tree sizes? What?
西条くん、変態なのら。
So she couldn't answer, which meant she was a delusion of mine after all. No, I'm pretty sure your delusion would say, oh, blah, blah, blah.
コズピー、自分のスリーサイズなんてあまり測ったことないの。
Then just a bust is fine. Give me an approximate number.
恥ずかしいのら。
I got a little turned off by the overly lecherous conversation taking place in my own brain.
73くらいです。
The transfer student was flat-chested, that's for sure. Okay, so the dots connected there, at least. On a side note, I take tiny breasts. For some reason, the transfer student's face went red. Her body, already small enough, shrunk even further into itself. A coincidence. The voice at her reaction had simply happened to sync up. Besides, what she'd said hardly counted as proof.
ちゃんと答えたの。
Come on. I had no way of knowing the transfer student's bust size. I'd be up for arrest if I asked her to please let me measure it. What the fuck? Fine. So what's your birthday?
それなら簡単なのら。11月13日だよ。
Well, not that I could easily double check that either. I've gotten a life long ago if I were able. I had gotten a life long ago if I were capable of asking a 3D girl who I'd hardly ever talked to, "When's your birthday?" Jesus, just give the fuck up. This is delusion anyway. Pardon, wasn't me. Was a transfer student. The transfer student, who had been hanging her head in front of me, abruptly began rummaging around inside her bag. She pulled something out and thrusted it at me, teary-eyed. It was a student ID handbook, still all but brand new. When I opened the cover, her headshot and the name Orihara Kozue appeared, along with her date of birth. Her date of birth. My attention unthinkingly went toward it. Written there was November 13th.
嘘でしょ。
Come to think of it, her name, as far as I could tell from her idea, the transfer student was Orihara Kozue. Kozupi.
まさか。
だから最初からそう言ってたのら。コズピーなの。
Was this really not a delusion? The source of this voice was her? You mean...
西条くん、大丈夫？
Facing downward, the transfer student looked up through her eyelashes and pointed at my face. Her fingertip trembled.
タラリーって出てる。
I touched my face. The space beneath my nose was wet. I had a nosebleed. Look, your nose is bleeding. The transfer student offered me some pocket tissues. I had an eerie feeling as I accepted them from her and wiped the blood coming out of my nose. The transfer student,
コズピーだよ。
Kozupi, wasn't moving her mouth. She wasn't talking. Despite that, why could I hear her voice?
心の声なのら。
Don't talk like that. It's a turn off to hear it in the third dimension.
ごめん。
Hey, she could hear the voice of my heart too?
聞こえるよ。
普通に話さないがなんで
恥ずかしいし。
I see. I could understand how she felt, because I was the same. She looked around nervously, like a small animal, took a glance at me, then began walking toward the station by herself.
ここ離れた方がいいと思う。
Why? Perplexed, I followed her. I noticed it as I walked. There was a stabbing pain in my side. Since it dropped every time I took a step, I stopped and I couldn't stand it any longer. I held my side and took a breath. There were so many people. I friggin' hate Shibuya. Oh yeah, actually, now I finally understand what this is. This is actually the main entrance of the Shibuya station. And now that I've been here myself, I gotta say, at night, this place is fucking crowded. Like, there was almost no way to get out of this place. I actually went there with ACF-san, also known as Nick, and another friend from Belgium who happened to go to Japan the same day as I went, and also went for 2 months. He even went for like 2 months in a week, so that was kind of crazy. I definitely look forward to going back again, and Nick was nice enough to let me stay at his crib, so thanks to him, I had to pay less money, which made this whole trip possible in the first place. それじゃ、本当にありがとうございました、Nick sensei. It felt like everyone who passed by was laughing at me. It felt like all of them were watching me. I began to think that everyone knew my face. Don't look at me. Don't laugh at me. I wanted to rest someplace where there weren't many people.
ほいじゃあいいところがあるならご案内します。
Kozupi's energy level was blatantly different from the countless times when I'd spotted her at school. I know she was wordless in real life. Her mental voice was so...
ああ、今うるさい女って考えた。
It was convenient to be able to have a mental conversation, but also kind of disagreeable. Rather, I'd ended up accepting it right away. But how did this work anyway? Could it be a real psychic power?
やっぱりコズピーのこと気味悪いよね。こんなの普通じゃないし。
I don't mind things that aren't normal. Lately, I had a lot more opportunities to encounter the other eccentrics. Besides, you speak kind of weirdly, but you aren't scary, and you don't have any crazy conspiracy theories, which makes you preferable to the rest of them.
そう言ってもらえるとうるうるってなっちゃうのら。
Kozupi abruptly started crying as we walked along. Surprised, I hastily returned her tissue pack. She bowed her head to me more than was necessary as she accepted it, and wiped the tears from below her eyes. Back to what I was talking about. It was creepy and unsettling to have her hear everything I thought. Those were my unvarnished impressions.
そうだよね。ごめんなさい。でも聞きたくなくても聞こえちゃうの。
Is that so?
そうなの。
Well, whatever the case, You don't want to hear that from a gross otaku like me. A guy as creepy as me really doesn't have any value.
そんなことない。
Just as I was about to refer to depression mode, Kozupi cried out loudly in the voice of her heart.
ダメだよ。そんなことを言っちゃ。そんな悲しいこと。
She started streaming tears again. Why was she crying? Did she sympathize with me? If so, I didn't need it. After all, I created personalities in my brain and mistook them for real-life people. Rimi, for example.
それって咲畑さんじゃなかった。咲畑さんのこと？
You know her?
だってクラスメートだよ。西条くんの彼女さんなのら。
Wrong!
あ、違うの？てっきりそうだとばっかり思ってた。
Kozupi knew about Remy, which signified that Remy truly existed. She wasn't my delusion. She wasn't a character I devised in my brain. Remy was really there.
そうか。
Thank goodness. But if so, why hadn't she contacted me? Not even once. I must have fallen out of favor with her after what happened at the O front.
咲畑さん、地震があったあの日、青い顔をして早退して行っちゃったのら。それ以来、学校来てないよ。もしかして家族に何か悲しいことがあったかも。
I see. I felt delivered, knowing that Remy hadn't thrown me aside seriously, made me seem about to cry. If that were the case, I had a reason to attend school again. I wanted to see Remy one more time. Until then, I try my hardest and keep going to school.
気をつけてね。
Huh?
西条くんが咲畑さんと付き合ってるって思ってたから言わなかったけど咲畑さんには気をつけて。
What do you mean?
咲畑さんはよくわかんないのら。
I'm asking what you mean. You don't get her, you say? The staking? Or how I was missing my memories of being classmates with her since freshman year? There were definitely things about Remy that remained mysterious, even now. But she saved me countless times. When I was frightened, she'd tell me, I'll be there for you. She wasn't my enemy. For some reason, Kozupi's eyes were rolling back in her head.
そんなに一度にいっぱい考えられると。コズピーついていきにゃい。
Sorry. It was sort of odd. When I was talking to people, I generally ended up saying less than 2% of the conversation. But when I spoke in my heart, I talked too much, or rather, thought too much. It was the same for Kozupi. I hadn't thought she would be so talkative in her head anyway.
喋ってるっていう感覚は薄いよ。考えてるだけ。それが流れ込むだけ。相手にはビビーって、相手からはドバーって。慣れてないと自分の思考と相手の思考がごちゃごちゃってなってにゃーってなるの。
Was he speaking Japanese or what? Although I sort of got nuances of it. So there weren't any little subtleties like in regular conversations. Things like seeing the other person's expression or finding yourself unable to say what you wanted wouldn't happen. If people's hearts kept leaking out, you'd lose the ability to read the atmosphere. Neither a one-way or two-way transmission. It wasn't altogether unlike having to pick one flying arrow out of many and stop yourself from listening to the others.
だから気楽だし距離感も近いけど傷つくことも簡単なの。
For a second, Kozupi's face clouded over, but she soon put on a teary smile.
西条くんは初めてなのにすんごく上手だよ。コズピーとビビビが合うの。
My BB beeps? Was she trying to say that our wavelengths matched?
そう波長波長。
Well, it might have been because Seraton had the same kind of speech quirks.
あ、でもあの時の西条くんは怖かったの。おびー。
Back then?
今日の朝教室で。
Now that she mentioned it, I fantasized about some really bad stuff, hadn't I?
だからうひゃーって思ってつい声をかけちゃったのら。本当はなるべくこの力を他の人に知られないようにしようって決めてたのに。
No, at the time I hadn't given a damn about anything. Well, they were mere delusions to the end, I guess. It'd be normal to despise me for it.
きっとそれを本当にやってたらコズピーは西条くんを殺してたよ。
What? She said something so disturbing with such innocence. The gap between the two made me shudder. We silently, albeit continuing to speak in our minds, crossed through the shopping district and came out on Inokashira Avenue. From the way we walked wordlessly without glancing at each other's faces, an observer might have perceived us as a charmingly naive young couple. Next to me, Elizabeth caught an enormous breath. Eyes round, she looked up at me.
カップル？
No, it was just an example. Example.
またふひゃーってさせられたのら。西条くんにラブラブラブ告白されたかと。
Sorry. Yeah, it was pretty hard to cope with how everything passed through to her. When talking with Kozupi, it would behoove me to do my best not to wander into unnecessary daydreams. Yeah, no shit.
聞きたいな。先週の西条くんがテレビに出てた時のこと。
She wouldn't believe me even if I told her.
それ決めつけ？うぐー。コズピーはあの時下にいたんだよ。
Below.
スクランブル交差点、ハチ公口の改札前、ちょうど通りかかって。あの時ずっと声聞こえてたよ。西条くんの声。ナナミちゃんを助けたい、助けなきゃって聞こえたよ。
My mental voice had traveled that far. There was an unexpectedly great distance between the roof and the station turnstiles.
それだけあの時の西条くんの思いは強かったのら。
Then Kozupi would understand that I hadn't created such a ruckus with the intention of putting on a psychic performance.
だから価値はなくなくないよ。なく
But in the end, it hadn't done any good. I prioritized my own life over saving Nanami, my little sister, I'd fled at the very brink of things. Giuseppe stopped in front of Loft. She looked at me as she pointed at the store entrance. Apparently, the place she'd said she would guide me to was inside here. I didn't think there was anywhere to rest in the loft. Besides, there were a lot of customers in a small, enclosed space there. Without my realizing it, my legs had started shaking. The cheers and bellows I'd heard from the pedestrian crossing that night echoed in my head. I didn't want to go anywhere that was full of people. I wouldn't have anywhere to escape to if I entered a loft.
大丈夫だよ。
Disregarding my fear, she went further and further ahead. Doing my best not to look at what lay around us, I had no choice but to hurry on after her. When we got on the upward escalator, Kozupi turned back at me, standing behind her, with her small frame standing one step higher, put her about the same height as me.
ナナミちゃんは助かったんだよね。だったら西条くんが頑張ったおかげだよ。
I hadn't saved her myself. It was the same as if I hadn't done anything.
屋上から手を伸ばしてたよね。何をしようとしたの？ビョーンって飛ぼうとしたのかな？
No, I was trying to take hold of the sword. It was an illusionary sword, one that blended into the vista I saw from the rooftop.
理想度？
What? Yeah, that's it. He'd said I could grasp it if I reached out, but I couldn't do it.
なんで
I unthinkingly shouted. A couple passing us on a downward escalator gave me gold looks, and I hurriedly covered my mouth with my hand. Kozupi, how do you know about these swords?
コズピーも持っているもん。
When we got off of the escalator at the 5th floor, Kozupi casually raised her right hand over her head. It was similar to the gesture of someone using her hand to create a shadow as protection against the brightness of the sun. Praise the sun. The light suddenly materialized in the air, following her hand. No, more than simple light, they were lines. If I were to make an analogy, hello, they resembled a wireframe. Numerous lines of light intermingled intricately into space where there should have been nothing, and at last they formed a shape akin to that of a snowboard. Several streaks of blue light, more fiercely brilliant than the wire frame lines, ran across it. Kozupi closed her open hand. Wow. The instant she did, that thing had been a wireframe, transformed to a solid, cold-seeming metal plank, as though texture had been applied to it.
理想度
The shape was all too separate from that of Ayoses and Senna's, but even so, it had the same sort of air to it. Once again, taking green, because this is the full green run. Too sinister to be even called a plank. Too undecorative to be called a sword. It possessed both innocent ferocity and awe-inspiring destructiveness. She carelessly held it on high. What part of the delicate body of hers contained such strength? Well, that's something we'll be finding out in the next episode of Dragon Ball Z. I mean Chaos Head, of course. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time, which should be tomorrow, I guess, for you guys. Whatever. I'll see you guys then.